me, Jerry. Ladies, gentlemen, fine folks of the internet, welcome to Jefta's Book Club, or more accurately, Jefta's Sinus Infection Club, as I am on the tail end of a very bad sinus infection, and I wanted to wait until I was feeling a little bit better to start my first episode, but time waits for no man. There's no time like the present, and I have the means of production, by which I mean my general use 12-hour Sudafed nasal decongestant, my Puffs Plus lotion, not sponsored, but Puffs, if you're watching, tap in, and we're going to pretend that didn't happen, because it didn't happen. Last but certainly not least, the subject of our discussion today, this little number, Poppy and Rye, book 4 in the Poppy series by this guy, AVI. Now, I actually know an AVI in my personal life. She is the wife of a dear friend of mine, and also a dear friend herself. But this AVI is not her. Not the same AVI. This AVI is a second-generation immigrant raised by Alsatian and Russian Jews who moved to New York. He himself happened to take an interest in children's books because his parents, well, I'm not sure if his mom was a playwright and his father was a writer, or vice versa, but this AVI, is descended from a playwright and a writer, and happens to have a very, very gifted ability to write children's books, which is why he's written over 80 of them. There's a number of books that I could have chosen from my childhood to do an episode on. Why I picked this one in particular to start off episode 1 is because it just stuck out in my mind in terms of weird, compelling, maybe prematurely mature literature that I read. I think I was maybe like 9 or 10 years old when I first read this book. And, you know, it's got mice on the cover. It's very, whimsical, I guess, is the word you could use to describe it. But the plot is quite prematurely mature. And maybe that'll make a little bit more sense as we sort of delve into this story and why it stuck out to me so much that I wanted to make the first episode about it. So a couple quick things about AVI, apart from his lineage. So I'm gonna have to do this for every author too, but pardon me. I mean, I think it makes sense to have a little bit of background on the writers, just to give a little bit of context as to who was writing the work. I'm going to try and focus more on the stories themselves than the authors, but obviously there's value in knowing the background and knowing, the who behind the what, so to speak. So that aside, a couple quick things about AVI, aka Edward Irving Wardis, which is, I don't know. It's a funny name, but I don't know. It wouldn't, if you look up AVI, like the author, he doesn't look like an Edward Irving Wardis, at least in my eye. But maybe that's just my preconceived notions. A funny way of saying it kind of sounds like a black guy name. That's not. It sounds like a commit to like a wide receiver commit to Alabama State. But you know what? Whatever. Edward Irving Wardis, apart from being born in Brooklyn and being a twin, he's won the Newbery Medal, which is a very, very prestigious children's book award. And to be honest, Doesn't surprise me, because this book stands out. Okay, let's get into actual Poppy and Rye. The story starts off with two mice, Valerian and Clover. They are the parents of our, I guess, ex-protagonist, because he's dead at this point. Spoiler. Ragweed. The story starts off with them, with Valerian and Clover, the parents of Ragweed. They have 60 plus children, 13 of which still live at home. And Ragweed is the eldest of the children, and he was, the one to venture off in the last few books, and the main character of the last few books. Now, his boldness and adventurousness kind of catches up to him as he's deceased by the time of Poppy and Rye, because he ran into an owl by the name of Mr. Okux, who rips him to shreds, as owls often do to mice. Valerian and Clover, they're in their little mouse den, and Clover's sort of like a thick mama, let's say, and Valerian is sort of like a skinny, neurotic fellow. But the story starts off with Valerian coming up to Clover and basically freaking out. He's like, "Hey, you need to check this out." He gets her out of their little mouse den, and he shows her what there is to freak out about. She's in the midst of a litter, so she's nursing and sluggish and all the good stuff that comes with being a postpartum mother. But she comes out of the den, she goes up with Valerian, and she sees that all of a sudden in the brook there's some beavers about, and they're building, as beavers do, a dam. And already, even in the early stages, they can see, the water's kind of rising, because the meadow's kind of like a little pit, right? And so they can see the water is rising. And this is how the story starts off. And so Valerian is already like, okay, this is only going to get this is the start of the dam. There's only a couple of them right now. This is going to get way worse, which he is very correct about. That's the essential conflict of the story, is that they're going to get drowned out of their home if they don't leave because of these beavers. Poppy's main conflict, as the stuff with the beavers is happening, Poppy's main conflict is journeying back to her deceased fiance's hometown to inform them that he's no longer with them, or within their realm, or however you want to put it. And to tell them yeah, he got killed by this owl, Mr. Okux, on one of our adventures, and he's no more. So Poppy lives on the total, complete opposite side of the forest. And so her story is journeying to Ragweed's folks. Now Poppy is sort of I guess you could say, a free spirit, much in the same vein as Ragweed. She has a very chill life on the opposite side of the forest with her bestie, Ereth, who is an elderly porcupine. An elderly, very grumpy porcupine. He does not fuck with Ragweed at all. I mean, from the very beginning, because they're kind of opposite characters. In a sense, Ereth is old and stationary, and Ragweed is young and kind of like what do you call it? He's got wanderlust, I guess, Ragweed. Again, very much like a stoner, West Coast type of character that AVI creates, which is very funny because you'd expect it to be a little bit more basic, but he has Ragweed had a way of speaking that could let you know, okay, he's this type of dude. He's like a surfer dude. Ereth is a very simple character. He likes staying in his little section. He doesn't really tolerate many people, and many people cannot tolerate him, conversely. Poppy, for whatever reason, has a soft spot for him, and he kind of has a soft spot for her. And so they kind of had been doing their own thing up until ragweed came along in the earlier books. But Ereth doesn't really, he's kind of like a protector character. I mean, obviously nobody's going to want to tussle with a porcupine. But when Poppy says like, hey, like I want to go tell Ragweed's family what happened to him, Ereth sort of begrudgingly agrees to go along, kind of by some reverse psychology work on Poppy's part. Poppy calls him old, and Ereth takes deep offense to that, and basically agrees to go along with her out of spite. He's like, well, he's like, first of all, fuck you, and second, I'm not old and I can do what I want. And he's like, you know what, I will go with you. And so Poppy convinces her old friend Ereth to journey along with her on this mission to inform Ragweed's family. And so when they go on their journey to the brook, well, they have a hard time finding where exactly it is, because there's multiple brooks. It's a big forest. There's multiple brooks, there's multiple streams, there's multiple meadows and whatnot. And so they have to sort of ask for directions and get closer to it. Back to Ragweed's folks' side, they see the water rising. The water level is rising, and they see the other animals getting like flooded out of their homes. But they're determined to stay. Their den, their original den, was the birthplace of Ragweed. It's where they've been all of their lives. It's where they've raised and weaned and, graduated, I suppose is the word to use, all of their 60 plus kids. Although again, 13 of them still live at home at the time of the book. And so it's all they've ever known. It's like a perfect home for them, for their family. And they're not keen on leaving. Even as they see the water level rising, as they see other animals like shrews and voles and chipmunks, and whatever else, like leaving, they're like, we're going to hold out until like we really have to leave. And that's exactly what they do. They hold out until water starts coming into their den. And so now they're like, okay, like we're going to get drowned, like essentially if we don't leave. And they try to negotiate with the beavers, which is where the next stage of the story comes into play. Valerian goes down to the pond. There's enough water has accumulated. And he tries to talk to the head beaver, who goes by the name of Mr. Canad. And Castor P. Canad, which is, I think it's supposed to be like a play on Canada because they have a lot of beavers. But Valerian tries to like reason with him, like, hey, like, it's a free country. You can do it. You can do what you want. But also, like, the pond that you're building is sort of, displacing multiple families that have been here for multiple generations, including ours, because we're going to get drowned out. And we have we have newborns, we have kids with us, like we have teenagers, etc. Whatever the mouse version of teenagers is, you know what I mean. And Mr. Canad is sort of like, I don't give a fuck. Like, we're gonna keep building our dam. That's what beavers do. And he keeps repeating this motto, this really ominous motto that like gets continuously more ominous as the book goes on, of progress without pain, is what he keeps saying. And so he basically is like, Valerian, I hear you. I get that your family is at the risk of getting drowned out of your home and being displaced, but also I have a business to run. And that's the other thing that AVI does. It's very interesting, is that like the beavers, they're a family, but they're also like a literal corporation. They call themselves Canad and Co. So their company's slogan is progress without pain. So Mr. Canad, he's like the patriarch of the company, and all of his employees are family members, right? But they operate as a literal corporation. in a lot of ways, they're kind of like a black rock. And I don't make that comparison superfluously. I make that comparison because they refer to the little dam mounds that accumulate, that refer to them as, literally in the book, Kanad's cute condos. They refer to them as condos, Kanad's condos. And they have like a very entrepreneurial spirit about them. In chapter 7, Mr. Kanad says, we're going to build the biggest, best, most profitable pond in the whole country. Which is like, so they're very enterprising for beavers. I mean, I guess all beavers are enterprising. They can't help but to build. It's their instinct. But that's literally ingrained into their family structure and their social structure, is that, like, we are a corporation, and our main goal above all else is to expand. And Avi does an excellent job of sort of driving that home in this book. And so I think maybe, hopefully, you can kind of see why this book stuck out to me in the first place, is because it's like it's supposed to be a children's book, but yet you have like corporate expansionism. You have like a dead fiancé sort of journey that's happening. Like the fiancé of the formerly deceased protagonist is like trying to like go on this like big long treacherous journey to inform the family of her deceased. It's very Jane Austen. That's what kind of, I didn't know who Jane Austen was when I was like 9 years old, of course, but like years back, like in my teenage years, and now looking back on it, I'm like, this is like a very Jane Austen ass plot in terms of like how it's structured, what it consists of, who's involved. It's quite like, not, I wouldn't say adult isn't really the right characterization, but it's like quite, again, mature is the word I use for a children's book. But anyway, Poppy and Ereth, they journey, and eventually they find the brook, like where Ragweed grew up in, where his family is in. And actually, I should go back a little bit. So eventually, Ragweed's family is displaced. Water starts dripping into their den, and like eventually they have like a flood. Like if you ever had like your basement or like your first floor, if you don't have if you ever had a flood, that's what happens. And they're like, okay, like we're gonna get it's only gonna get worse. The beavers are not giving up. A couple of the kids try to like negotiate with the beavers and be like, hey, like, you're kind of displaced. Like, we're not saying don't build whatever, but at the same time, the bigger this gets, the more families you displace. And the beavers, again, are very kind of hilariously like, we don't really give a fuck. Like, because I mean, the beavers, there is like a real element of like, the beavers can kill smaller animals. They're big animals, like compared to mice, compared to wolves, compared to like, all these little critters of the forest, like, in like the Disney sense. The beavers are like, we can crush you. We're big, bulky animals. Our teeth are like, can chop down trees, like we could cut you open. They don't actually ever say this in the book, which again speaks to Avi's strategic writing. It's almost like the children's book element kind of curves some of the more violent implications of the story, but the implication is made clear, like by the beavers, like it's in our nature. We're gonna build this dam whether you like it or not. We're gonna keep making it bigger whether you like it or not. And I mean, ultimately, we can kill you. Like, and they don't ever say those things, but the way that they speak, it's made very clear through the implication. And so the family, this is a long way of saying the family has to move, ultimately. Ragweed's family, Valerian, Clover, their 13 kids, they have to move. They move further up a hill in the brook by a massive boulder. And there's like a little hole by the boulder that has a den or an underground network. It's nowhere near the size that they need it to be to support their family, but it's sort of like a makeshift home. So they move a little bit up the brook. The beavers totally take up like the first however many feet above sea level of the brook, and they're happy. They're momentarily satisfied, except of course for Mr. Kanad, who's the patriarch. He eventually has this I should reference. So chapter 8, or I should reference before chapter 8. So apart from ragweed, when it comes to Clover and Valerian's family, the next oldest mouse is Rye. Is this mouse called Rye? And Rye is he's almost identical in looks to ragweed, but in contrast to ragweed's sort of ho-hum, chill / go with the flow / adventurous / bold nature, ragweed is very much a thinker. He's a philosopher, and not necessarily in like a good sense. He's more of like a dreamer, as some would say. He spends a lot of time daydreaming, thinking to himself, lollygagging, if you will, wandering. Yes. So Rye, Ragweed's second youngest brother, spends a lot of his time when Rye was alive and at the brook. He spent a lot of his time sort of in his older brother's shadow, which is something I'm sure if you're like the middle child or, second oldest or what have you, like you can probably relate to. I mean, Avi does another thing that he does an incredible job of is making it relatable. Because I'm sure we all have siblings that we have like sort of like weird beef with because of the structure of the family. And Avi does a good job of painting that element, because Rye is like I think the best written character in the story, just because he really successfully communicates that Rye loves Ragweed. Everybody in Ragweed's family loves Ragweed. He's like the it guy. He's eldest. He can kind of come up with a solution for everything. A lot of the story, the family is hoping that Ragweed will just sort of magically or like miraculously come back and kick out the beaver, like come up with like some like grand plan to like kick the beavers out. I spent a lot of the book hoping for that to happen, not knowing of course that he's dead. But it's sad because like they rely on Ragweed so much to sort of like be like the main character, and just sort of figure things out, and that's just not happening. It's not happening. His main character syndrome is what gets him killed by the owl in the last book. So he's gone, and whatever like savior figure that they're hoping will come back and save them, it's not going to happen. The beavers are bigger. They're expanding. They have a very entrepreneurial, corporatist, expansionist mindset, and they know it. They know that they have like the vast majority of the critters of the forest outpowered. And so Rye sort of becomes the de facto eldest, even though like there's this like kind of persistent hope that Ragweed will return. The family sort of places Rye in this spot where they expect him to sort of take over. And Rye, being his insecure, thoughtful, dreamer self, knows that he's not really up to the task. Like, he's not Ragweed. He's timid. He's insecure. He second guesses himself. He's more of a dreamer than a doer. And, he spends a lot of the book sort of complaining that, like, everybody wants him to be Ragweed, but he'll never be Ragweed. And even he himself wants to be Ragweed. He makes that very clear. Like, he wants to be that kind of guy or son, but he's not up to he doesn't have the goods. He's not up to the task. So Rye decides that he's going to go and find Ragweed, since the family's been pushed out of their home. They're up on this weird hill, on this giant boulder, in this like uncomfortable, too tiny den that to support their family. And everybody's like, just sort of expecting Ragweed to come back and magically solve everything. And it really gets to Rye, because it's like, he takes it as like, they don't think that like anybody, they don't think I can do it. And he knows he can't do it, but he's like, they don't even like, it's not even a thought, like a consideration, like, oh, maybe Rye will do it. It's like, nobody thinks that at all. And it really gets to him, because he's always lived in the shadow of his older brother. And now that the stakes are really high, it's like everybody's just sort of coping and hoping for like the second coming of Ragweed, instead of even like considering like maybe Rye could solve it. And Rye really, he hates the feeling of being not good enough and not up to his older brother's status. So he takes it up. He gets really offended at one point in the story. And he's like, everybody's waiting for Ragweed, but if I left, he's like, nobody would ask about like me at all. They'd be like, they sort of just carry on. And so it gets all of these like thoughts sort of penetrate his mind, and it gets to him in like a real way. And he figures that like, okay, like, and he tries to pretend. There's like this really funny encounter where he, in front of his younger siblings, like tries to tell off the beavers, and it does not go well. We'll just say that. Mr. Kanad's daughter, Clara, humiliates him in front of his younger siblings. And he's just like, okay, well, I'm trying to fake it till I make it, kind of, to be my older brother, but I'm not my older brother. He's like, okay, what's best for me to do is to just go find Ragweed, bring him back. He can solve everything, probably, just like how everyone thinks, even if it's irrational. Ragweed is that kind of guy that just like, he just sort of has a way of figuring things out and being the solution to a lot of issues. So he's like, okay, they don't care about me. I can't live up to my older brother. I'm going to go out, find him, bring him back. He'll solve everything. And then in Rye's mind, he'll be like, I'll be free to go on my own adventures. And even though it's still an attempt at trying to be his older brother, it kind of makes sense in a weird way. He feels, even though like all of the golden mice of the brook are in it together, Rye feels like an afterthought in a really real, serious, hurtful way. He feels like his family doesn't appreciate what he does, and he feels like the standard of Ragweed is such like a singular, not, it's just really hard to replace, just like a irreplicable, singular, ubiquitous character. And so Rye kind of understands that he really gets to the point where he understands that he's never going to be that. And so he's like, okay, my best bet, if I want to like be my own person, my own mouse, I guess, again, these are all anthropomorphic mice. Again, this is a children's book meant for like kids. But he's like, okay, I'm going to go out and find Ragweed, bring him back. He'll solve everything. And then, you know what? Maybe he'll even stay at home and protect us from other dangers. But then I'll both satisfy my family's need for a Ragweed type figure, and then also allow the opportunity for myself to go on my own adventures. They won't notice me whether I'm here or not here. I'll never be Ragweed. It's better they have Ragweed and I can do my own thing. And so that's his thought process. And so he goes out into the forest beyond the brook. And then that's where we get to our middle section of the story, where Poppy meets Rye. And chapter 8 is, I mark it as the dance, but it's where my probably my favorite scene in the whole book happens. Rye and Poppy run into each other, and Poppy is just like it's like it's a love at first sight type scenario where Poppy is like, holy shit, this guy looks just like Ragweed. Rye has the distinctive characteristic of having a notch in his ear. But apart from that, and that's from like a childhood accident. That's they don't really. I don't know if they go into it in the story. I can't remember. But I mean, that's. Apart from that, though, like Rye and Ragweed look almost identical, and so and then at first, the first time they run into each other in chapter 8 in the forest, Poppy literally thinks she's like, holy shit, is this like a ghost of Ragweed? But they run into each other. They don't say anything. They're just sort of like captivated, absolutely captivated by one another, and they have this really beautiful, immaculate scene where they just they start dancing. They just dance. They don't say a word. They just like Poppy just starts dancing, and then Rye just is compelled to dance with her as her dance partner. And it's not like, it's not that kind of, it's like, a romantic type, more of like a waltz, I guess you could say, through the forest. Again, it's this really brief moment, and both of them think that they're like kind of hallucinating. Like they're like, is this real? Is this a real person? But they dance with each other. In chapter 8, which is again probably my favorite chapter in the whole book, but it's really, really beautiful. And I forget what happened. I like why exactly it stops, but one or both of them get spooked, and they run off in opposite directions. Again, they don't say it. They don't say a word, which is like one of those like kind of annoying moments, I guess, looking back on it. So Poppy and Rye don't spend like the 5 minutes it would have taken to ask each other a few simple questions to figure out, oh, you're looking for your older brother. I'm looking for the family of my dead fiancé. That happens to be the same person. Let's exchange information and then, get our shit figured out. They had this whole spontaneous dance moment. They go about their separate ways, and now the rest of the book can happen. It's just one of those moments. Sorry. Back to Ragweed / Rye's family's side of the story. Now the Canads go full Blackrock in chapter 11, essentially. Mr. Canad like literally is like, okay, like I've built this pond, I've taken over the brook / meadow, it's like it went from like a sprawling meadow to a pond now, like a murky kind of brownish watery pond. And he's like, okay, cool. He's like, you know what? And he has like this moment of like, and this is why I make the Blackrock comparison. He's like, what's better than a pond? That's not a good snap. A lake. And so he literally he has this scene where he's like overlooking the pond, and he's just like, wait a minute, we can make like Canid Lake. Like not even, he's like, a lake is better than a pond. And then he goes on like this whole like monologue diatribe thing, and he's like, what's even better than a lake? An ocean. And he like, and this is where you really get the sense that like the beavers in this story are evil. They are evil. They will expand at the cost of anyone's life, familial integrity / cohesiveness. They don't care. They're going to drown everybody if it means they can have like the biggest, most expansive version of Canid's cute condos. Yes, so chapter 11, he has this whole corporate shareholder / family meeting, and Mr. Canid decides that like we're gonna build higher up. The water level is gonna rise even higher, and the second stage of the dam is gonna be right where that big ass boulder is, which is exactly where our ragweed's family, our mouse family, has been displaced to. Like, literally, you can't write it any better. He's like, this is chapter 11 is where you realize, like, oh, he's like a straight up bad guy. Like, he's kind of convincing himself this is okay when he literally just displaced a family, and then he's literally going to re-displace that same family because of his own ambition. So moving forward a little bit to chapter 13, Ereth and Poppy, they finally encounter the meadow. The actual meadow. Or not the meadow, I'm sorry. The brook. I have to... Slight correction there. The brook. They encounter the brook where Ragweed grew up, and they're like, oh shit, like, this is the brook. And Ereth, he has this whole sort of emotional breakdown where he's just like, I don't want to, he's like, I don't want to get involved in this guy's bullshit. Like, I didn't like him to begin with. He's dead now. Now we're, like, going to get reinvested into this dude's family. I just want us to hang out. And by us, Ereth and Poppy. He's like, I just want us to hang out in our own little corner of the forest. Just chill like we always have. And basically, they're about to reach the brook, and Ereth is like, I'm not going any further. Like, you go, you tell the family and whatever. I'm gonna stay by this tree until you get back. And Ereth is kind of a supreme asshole. If I'm gonna be on, that's how he's depicted. That's how his characterization is, and to be honest with you, it's like pretty accurate. He's always constantly shitting on everybody. He refuses to ask for directions if you have one of those types of parents or dads. He doesn't like getting involved in anything he feels is like unnecessary or that's going to cost him excess energy. And so they finally reach Ragweed's place, and he's just like, I give up. It's storming, it's pouring, everything's wet, everything's cold, and he's just like, you know what? You go forward, you tell them, I'm gonna wait underneath this tree. And so Poppy goes forward and does just that. And Ereth sleeps under some random tree to like keep out of the cold. But then Ereth gets really mad because Ereth is also just like kind of like Rye. He's also insecure. But where Rye is sort of like a soft boy, dreamy kind of insecure, Ereth he's an elderly kind of boomer insecure, where he's pissed like 95% of the time. He doesn't know why he does a lot of the shit that he does. He kind of gets worried. He's like, well, what if Poppy gets reinvested into like this family, into like Ragweed's family, and what if she has kids? Like, he starts thinking like, I literally only have one friend, and it is Poppy. And he kind of realizes he's like deathly afraid, terrified, petrified of her moving on. Like, if she does get reinvested into this golden mouse family, Poppy is a deer mouse, I should also specify. So she's like quite a bit smaller than the mice that are the main characters as far as like Ragweed's family is concerned in this story. But he is like, he does have that realization of like, oh, like, at first he's really pissed. He's like, I hate Poppy. I never liked Poppy. But then he realizes, he's like, that's the only person that puts up with me. And if I lose her, I'm fucked. Like, nobody else is gonna put up with me. I'm grouchy, I'm grumpy, I constantly shit on everything and every idea that isn't me staying in my little corner. And he sort of has like this epiphany / like breakdown where he's like, he feels abandoned by Poppy. And I will say, in the story, Poppy is like, I'm gonna go to Ragweed's folks, and she's like, I'm gonna be gone, at most one night. And Poppy ends up being gone several nights. Whole time, Poppy has arrived at Ragweed's family's house, and she tells them what's become of him. This is a pivotal moment because Poppy finally brings closure to the family, in a real way. They're sort of all of them, except for maybe the father, I would say, Valerian, is sort of, they're all sort of like hoping in the back of their minds, like, okay, maybe like our prodigal son Ragweed will come back and just figure out a way to just solve all of this. And when Poppy like lets him know like he was killed, it kind of like ends that line of thinking for real, in like a real way, that like, okay, he isn't coming back. He's not coming back. He's so whatever solution to this displacement problem is gonna have to come from within the family. Rye is there the whole time. Rye is there in the background, like kind of to his song. Because the thing is, again, like both of them thought they damn near hallucinated the whole scene where they danced together. And so Rye is like the woman of my dreams that I didn't even know if that was real or not. Like, of fucking course. She was in love with my older brother who always gets everything and is always the better version of me. And so while she's explaining it to their parents, to Rye and Ragweed's parents, Rye is just sort of like, I mean, crushed. His soul is just crushed. He's like, of fucking course, this aberration was in love with my older brother. And on top of that, he's dealing with the fact that he finds out his older brother's dead. Like dead, for real. And he's just like, he's mad, but he's also, he's sad that his older brother is dead, but then also he's like mad that the girl that he thought, the girl of his dreams was in love with. He has all these conflicting emotions. He's like, what am I supposed to make of this chick that I met, that I thought was like the woman of my dreams, that I thought I was like dreaming of, actually is real. And on top of that, of course, she was in love with my older brother who I could never live up to. And so that's his thinking. And he literally like runs out of the den in the middle of Poppy like explaining the relationship and explaining what happened, because he's just so like overcome with emotion. And then this leads to the precursor to the second climax of the story. Rye is like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to break into the beaver's dam. Which he does. And he almost drowns. And he immediately gets captured by no one other than Mr. Canid himself. The grand Uba of the Black Rock. Is it Blackstone? I think it's Black Rock. Then the Grand Uba of the Black Rock beaver equivalent empire, Mr. Canid himself. And he literally like, Mr. Canid like traps him into like this little like, mini mouse cage. And he's just like, okay, well, cool. Like now we have a bargaining chip. Now I can like trade you for basically, in exchange for you, I can evict your family from the big grand boulder on the hill to turn this pond into a lake and fulfill my expansionist empire. It's so fucked up. It's sad. It's kind of unexpected. But this book, I mean, for being a children's book, I have to give it credit for just fulfilling on its promises, for really delivering a complicated, heavy, detailed story that just doesn't sit on its haunches in terms of, oh, it's just a children's book. And I'm not going to spoil the ending. I'm not going to spoil Poppy and Ereth getting reunited, or the beavers kind of getting what's coming to them in terms of their illegal expansionism. But I do think it's an important book, And I do think there's a reason why, out of all of the books that I've read in my childhood, this one in particular stuck out to me enough to where I wanted to make episode 1 about this. So if you've made it this far, I want to thank you. Thank you for sticking with me. I hope you found the plot and the tale interesting. And I really do hope you give it a read. You can start with book 1. I'm not suggesting that you pick right up on book 4 like I did. But I think there's enough substance here. I think this is a good story, and I think it really speaks to a lot of what's happening today. In strange ways, even though it's anthropomorphic woodland characters, kind of like a Disney / Jane Austen story. But I really hope that you give it a read, and I hope that I've done a good enough job of selling it to you, of selling the value of it to you, that you pick it up. So if you made it this far, thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you the next time on Jefta's Book Club.